Hi. Sorry to interrupt the guitar riff. Before we head into our conversation tonight, just wanted to chat for a minute. This is normally the time in our intro where you would hear me say, "This is Bob Lingle, and welcome to the Weaponized Literacy Podcast." But I've decided that there's a lot of aggression and confusion and anger in the world, and I don't know that we need to weaponize literacy. I kind of feel like we just need to let literacy be literacy. So rather than me introducing you to the Weaponized Literacy Podcast, I'd like to say hello. I am Bob Lingle, and this is the Good Neighbor Podcast. This is a place where I connect with authors and the community. We use this time to discuss life, sometimes death, but always books. I hope you enjoy our conversation today, and I hope you get something out of it. The world is a pretty confusing place right now, so let's do our best to be good neighbors. Who was that guy? All right. Let me just bring everybody into the discussion here. I am Bob Lingle, as that other person mentioned. Thanks for joining us tonight for what is the first episode of our reformatted podcast, the Good Neighbor Podcast. Joining us tonight is Alice A. Scott of the YWCA. She is our co-host for the evening. She is a native of the Jamestown area, a recent graduate earning her master's in American Studies with a concentration in African American history. She plans to use her knowledge and new position as the Director of Social Justice and Race Equity Program at the YWCA to bring educational opportunities to the community surrounding various social and racial justice issues. Forgot to breathe. Erin K. Robinson is the illustrator of Brave, Black, First, 50-plus African-American Women Who Changed the World by Cheryl Hudson. Her work has been featured in the New York Times and the Washington Post, among other publications, and she has been nominated for an Emmy in the news and documentary category. Trained at the Parsons School of Design and the Corcoran School of Art, Erin splits her time between Brooklyn, New York, and Washington, D.C. Adrea Theodore is a mother, a pediatrician, and with the publication of A History of Me, an author of books for children. Growing up on Long Island, she was the kind of girl who almost always had a book in her hand, a library card in her pocket, and a stack of books in the corner waiting to be read or returned for more books. She currently lives in Durham, North Carolina, where she works with children at a local child advocacy center. Almost made it through that. Thank you all for joining us tonight, those watching and those I'm going to be speaking with. We are going to be talking about A History of Me. So, Adrea, can you give us a summary of the book and what inspired you to write this story?
Sure, Bob. A summary of the book is it's a story about a young girl who is a third grader, and she's the only brown girl in her class. And she's learning about the history of America, some American history of slavery, of segregation, of civil rights. And she's learning about that and also learning about the history of her family and how those two things kind of intersect and how they're related. In the process of that, she also learns about the traits that she's inherited from her ancestors, good traits of intelligence and creativity and courage and strength. And she wants to pass that information along to her daughter. Right. So that's kind of a basic summary of the story.
And what was the inspiration or inspirations for this story?
The main inspiration actually is something that occurred with my own daughter. When she was in elementary school in first grade, actually, when during this time of year when we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. holiday and they start learning about Black history during Black History Month, there was a time when sort of after that had happened, when we were having a conversation and she made a comment to me that she thought that being white was better. And sort of discussing that a little bit further with her at her age, sort of understood that in the lessons that she had gone through with her classmates, that she understood that if she had been born, back in the old days during slavery times or during the times of segregation, that there would have been a lot of things that she wouldn't have been able to do that her other classmates would have been able to do, primarily go to school way back in the day. Mm-hmm. And that really upset her and also made her feel bad about having brown skin. And so I wanted to kind of address that issue in a book, and in a part also because I remembered when I was that age having a similar kind of feeling, that there were so many things that we wouldn't have been able to do, that we hadn't been able to do just because of the color of our skin. And I really wanted to try to address those two things. I was surprised actually that this issue had still come up, because it had been so long since I was a kid, and I just figured that, by the time she got to school, everything would be fine. There would be, no issues with the curriculum itself, and so it was kind of a surprise to me.
And it's something I'm glad that you and Erin were available to connect with our community, because it's a small, rural, mostly white community. And to be able to have this, and I grew up in a not much larger, but still small, mostly white community. So, I mean, you don't expect as an adult to connect and be able to learn and take away things from a children's book. But I know that I did with this, and it really put a new perspective on things for me for this topic. And how did you get connected with the illustrator, Erin?
Erin was connected through our publisher. I think she said that she had met with our editor, Neal, and he was the one who connected her to the project.
Great.
Is that right, Erin?
That's correct.
I'm always interested with the writing process, and for children's books and illustrations, the how things get pieced together. And Erin, you might be able to speak to that more on your end of how you were able to get connected with this book, how like when it first came across your table.
So, like Adrea said, I got connected through my agent and through Neal Porter, our publisher. I had just kind of shifted gears and I guess a new career doing illustration work. And yeah, I got partnered with Neal, and he showed me this script, and it sat with me in a pretty powerful way. I connected to it immediately, and just immediately got visions of the kind of direction I wanted to take Adria's words in a poetic, powerful way.
So it resonated with your
Yeah,
personal experience growing up.
definitely. Yeah. I don't think as much as Adria's, but you're aware.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely aware.
And Alice, I wanted to bring you into the conversation. You are doing a number of things at the YWCA, but one of the reasons that the YWCA showed up on my radar is the Reading to End Racism program that you have going on.
Yeah, so our program is very new. At the YWCA, we just relaunched kind of our social justice and race equity program. And one of the programs that we are going to bring under that is Reading to End Racism. So this is basically a literacy program for youth, anywhere from kindergarten to 8th grade. And the books that we select are people from various cultures, ethnicities, racialized groups. And we read them. Of course, they're age appropriate. We read them and we have age appropriate conversations with the youth just to kind of get them talking about that people are different, but it's okay that people are different, how to celebrate this, and how to kind of step in if ever you see bullying happening, discrimination happening. So we're very excited about this. And after reading A History of Me, it's definitely making the list for Reading to End Racism.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was going to say, is a book like this, would this be a good part of your initiative?
Yes, definitely. Again, we want to make sure that we're not only, like you said, we live in a predominantly white area. So we know that there are probably going to be a single few of kids that are non-white, but we want to make sure that they're also comfortable and that their stories are being shared as well, and that they feel comfortable having these conversations with their classmates as well. And I feel like A History of Me did a beautiful job of kind of illustrating and highlighting how it feels to be that only kid in the class that looks different. So I'm hoping that when we bring this into the classroom and we bring this into the library reading programs that we plan on doing, that it really helps kids to feel empowered and comfortable in their skin when they might stand out a little bit more than other students.
That's great. Adria and Erin, I lost Adria. I don't know what happened there. So, Erin, you can speak to this topic.
Okay.
What was the collaboration process like? You had the story in front of you. How much were you consulting with Adrea as you were putting things together for the artwork? Did you kind of give an initial approach that you shared with her?
Well, usually the author and illustrator, they know of one another, but we aren't usually connected until probably maybe closer to the end of the project. But
Okay.
Adrea looked me up and reached out on her own, and we just sort of went through from there. There really wasn't much of collaboration between us initially, just on the words, the script. But we sort of, we just stayed in touch, and we finally met each other this past December. Of course, after the book is done. But
yeah,
I pretty much work with the editors, and they're kind of like they are the gatekeepers of the both of us.
yeah.
They'll pass on the information from one person to another.
For that process, Adria, was that stressful for you to kind of hand over this baby and trust that the artwork that came back was going to connect with what you wanted to do?
Definitely. You never know. Yeah, that's one thing that all of us authors who are not at the same time illustrators, that we all say. It's like, how can I give my words over to someone when I don't know what they're going to do? And so, yeah, it was definitely something that that was nerve-wracking for me at the time. But I let it go.
I just want to note, for anyone that's watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you can use the comment feature on those video streams to ask any questions, have any comments, and we will try to incorporate those into the discussion here. So, Adria, this book was inspired by both your experience and your daughter's, as we addressed, and you did touch on this, but that you were surprised that it was still, your experience was still relevant to what your daughter was going through. How similar was that, and does it seem like somewhat unfortunate that there's not a generational divide on this issue?
Yeah, I think, and it's very different because I grew up in New York on Long Island, and I moved to Virginia, to the Tidewater area, when I was in high school in 11th grade. And in both situations, I wasn't like the only brown child in my class. There was maybe one or two of us, or three of us at the time. So if you ask me, I can tell you all the other kids in my class who were brown skin, from elementary school all the way up. So, in New York, there was Tracy, and then there was Tracy, and then there was Otis, and then there was Maria, and then there was Larry, and that was it. And then when I moved to Virginia, there was, Sarah and Tammy and Brian and myself. So, and even though I went to public schools, really large, for example, high school, 1,600 kids in the high school, so 400 kids in my class. Most of the classes that I attended, there was just one or two of us in a class, sometimes myself only, and sometimes one other person, other than things like gym or the cafeteria recess time. But in my daughter's case, she is actually going to a private school here in North Carolina, and so for her, the classes are smaller, and there are just a few kids as well, in the same kind of situation. But it's generational changes are not just the location, but also the type of school, what type of community that we're.
Oh, I lost track. And I had a follow-up question, so let me find another question. So what was the initial approach that you had artistically, Erin, towards the book? Were you running through a few different ideas, or did you?
I wanted to. I mean, it's, I guess as serious as the subject could be, or as, important as the subject could be, I still wanted the book to feel, I didn't want it to feel intimidating. I wanted it to have a bit of an ethereal feel to it, and graphically strong and vibrant and rich in color, and making sure that our title, our girl, captured, all of the pages. So,
Is there a particular
there's
page
all
that you
sorts of
have that's a favorite?
Hmm?
Is there a particular page that you have that's a favorite?
I do. I mean, it's funny because I love the back cover of this, and I love, there are a few pages in here, and I love her, which I guess because she's on let me see her, kind of hard to read the features on here. And I love the one with her and her mom too. That page.
That's great.
And the cover's always lovely. So, yeah, just trying to, even in the beginning, even our main character, the girl, she went through a few different looks before we landed on her. I think Adrea finally got to see some of the transformation she went through before we landed on her. She had different hair and just a few different looks.
Nice.
And then we landed on this character here.
Mm-hmm. And Adrea, you are a pediatrician by trade. How was there a particular catalyst, or was there something that was writing a children's book or writing a book at all something that you had wanted to do for a while?
No, actually, I hadn't really planned on writing a children's book until after my daughter was born. I started reading more with her when she was born after reading like tons of medical journals and, and medical textbooks for a long time. But it was fun to kind of get back into some of the literature that I had enjoyed when I was a kid. And when she was really little, I had started making up stories for her and with her as sort of the main character. And that's kind of what piqued my interest in terms of writing stories, because I didn't see a ton of other books out there with characters that looked like her. And so I sort of explored what that would look like and what the process was to enter the field. So it took a number of years of sort of studying and learning and going to conferences and trying to get information. So.
What is your, with your daughter being the inspiration for this, what is her reaction to the book then?
She loves it. She's in high school now, so she's not always reading picture books. So when actually showed it to her, she was like, "Oh, I forgot how much fun I used to have reading these picture books. I forgot how much I used to love them." So she really enjoyed seeing it, and definitely is in favor of the book itself.
Great.
Yes.
We had a question come in from Susie. How did you come up with the title?
I think it's sort of interesting because when I think about medicine, one of the things that we do all the time is we take histories from people. We always ask about family history, and we also, write in our notes the history of present illness, and she has a history of whatever condition. And so part of it was just thinking about what the individual had gone through, her history, and because also we talked about the history of the country, the history of slavery, the history of segregation, the history of civil rights. And so just sort of thinking about all those different things sort of made me come up with the title, A History of Me. It's not the history of me, so it's not a complete history of everything that happened to me or to the child in the story, but it's a history of this particular aspect of her life.
And in going through, because it's a history of you, I imagine that there's quite a few experiences that you could have chosen to put into the book. Was there a weeding out process, and how did you decide what stories were going to stay in and what stories could sit to the side?
Yeah, it's hard for me at this point because it's been quite a long time since I started the process, to think about, how I actually weeded things out when I was writing. But when I attended a conference many years ago before COVID, um, there was a talk that was being given by Jack Gantos, who's a Newbery winner. And during the talk, there was something that he said that inspired me to think about the process that I used to make.
Oh. Sorry for the technical issues. So, Alize, for the Reading to End Racism program, you still need to get the books from us. I don't know if I missed Amanda when I went to run and grab dinner before this. But when does that program start?
We are collaborating with local libraries all throughout Chautauqua County, and we're hoping to be able to partner with them when they do their summer reading program. And then we also are going to pilot it with our own after-school programs and childcare programs, just to make sure that it works good and that it is kind of well received from the kids, because we know that this can be a heavy subject and a very new topic for them to kind of explore. But we feel it's very important. And again, we make sure that the conversations aren't very heavy, but we just read the books and then kind of have a very authentic conversation with them about how it made them feel and what kind of issues were maybe discussed and how we could address those if we saw our friend going through something like this. So we're very excited about it, and we hope to get it up and running very soon in the summertime.
And with everything, not to be a down, but with everything going on in the world and the negative conversations that are going on, some of the states and the rules and regulations that they're putting in, tip lines against teachers, have you had a discussion of the rollout of this, potential negative community response, and how you can kind of combat that or talk to that?
Yes, obviously with just starting the social justice and race equity program in general, we had the conversation that there might be some issues as far as backlash with some of the programs that we want to roll out. So obviously we make this an option available to teachers. We're not really going to force them to have us come into their classrooms and speak if they're not comfortable, which is why we are also starting within the library system. So that way it gives parents in the community an opportunity to kind of see how it unfolds, how the conversations go. And then after that, bringing it into the classrooms, kind of opening it up to teachers. And we do hope to do trainings with teachers of how to kind of have these conversations themselves, how to kind of facilitate these kind of discussions, any issues that might come up. So that way, even if maybe they don't want our program, they still know how to handle these kind of things. Because it can be very difficult. And like I said, living in the time that we live in now, it's very scary for some people when you mention things like race and discrimination and critical race theory and all these different things that make people panic. So we don't want to sugarcoat anything with our programs, but at the same time, we are aware that not everybody is on the same level when it comes to learning about these things or being open about these things. So we make sure that all of our programs are welcoming to people regardless of the learning scale that they're on, learning level that they're on when it comes to racial and social justice issues. And again, we hope that the books that we picked out are very welcoming, very friendly. They're not very heavy again on race and discrimination, but it's more of a celebration of all these different cultures, ethnicities, and how beautiful everybody's experiences are and how we should be learning more about them, because there's a whole bunch of different people that we live around. So it's important that we know how other people live.
That's great. I know, like, our podcast series has gone into a lot of different serious issues, but I found that the only time that we got negative feedback for anything was when we interviewed Dax Devlin Ross about racial issues. And I'm like, I mean, not surprising, but super disappointing.
Yeah.
I was going to go back to Adrea for the next question. I will pause for a moment, regroup myself. Well, I had a question for all of you, and if my sister's watching, she'll be glad, or maybe I'll get a lawsuit for stealing her brand. She's a personal trainer, and she's rebranded as Find Your Strength.
I like that.
growing up and dealing with these issues, like this book is a part, like can be a tool in a toolbox for kind of combating and coping and getting empowered to go through this. Where did you find your strength growing up, kind of going through an issue in a situation like this?
Me personally, I have a strong family foundation. Both of my parents, I could definitely go and talk to them about that, and they would just handle it. They would handle that kind of situation. I personally have not gone through anything heavy like that, but I've been made aware, and it was taught to me in a I guess in a serious way, but also in a safe way. But just lucky enough, or fortunate enough to have a parents that would make sure that was taken care of.
Adria, sorry we keep losing you. The question that I had was is specifically for you growing up and going through this situation. Having this book is a good toolbox for future children, but where did you find your strength going through your childhood?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know about the technical difficulties going on today, but I'll keep popping back in as we go along. But yeah, I think what Erin said is true, that, it's our family. I think part of what I wanted to show in the book is that, like my family, my ancestors, they had very few opportunities. And
I know she must be so frustrated.
I was going to say, if she can hear me, because she was using her phone. We were having an issue with the camera on her computer. So, Adria, if you can hear me, I feel like I'm in Poltergeist talking to the other side. Just log back in with your computer and we'll go without the video, if you can hear me. So, Alize.
Yes. Yeah. So, again, it definitely starts with the family. So I come from a multiracial, multi-ethnic family. So I never really felt out of place in my family. We were always around different looking people. But I do know when I experienced things in school, for example, being the only Black girl in the class when we're talking about these issues, I do remember just kind of bottling them up. Some of the things that we would learn about would make me very sad for obvious reasons. And I would want to cry in class, but I was like, I don't want people to think that I'm weird for crying, because obviously nobody else was relating to these issues the same way that I was. So it definitely helped once I got older, and not until the college level, unfortunately, but when I did start taking African American studies courses, and it really helped me to feel empowered when it came to how to address these issues, how to address these different discussions. And now that's kind of what I do for work. So it's great. But yeah, I feel like when I was younger, there was a time period where it didn't really faze me. I remember the first encounter I ever had was in first grade. Actually, somebody said, I'm Black. What do I know? I'm stupid because I'm Black. And I kind of just brushed it off because I was like, I don't know what that means, and I didn't tell my mom. I didn't go home and like cry to anybody because I was like, I don't know what that means. So during that period, I kind of just brushed it off. But then once I got to the high school level, again, I had mostly white friends. So you never want to feel left out. And sometimes they would make jokes that maybe weren't appropriate, but I would still laugh because I'm like, I don't know how to address these issues. I don't know how to say, like, this actually makes me uncomfortable, and it actually hurts my feelings. But I do remember there was one point in high school where I snapped on someone because they made a joke, and I was like, I've had enough. Like, this is not funny anymore. So yeah, I feel like you kind of just, you learn how to handle it, how it best kind of suits the situation that you're in, the age that you are. And again, family is always a major thing. My family is always super supportive about these issues. So yeah.
All right. Adria, I was going to say, if we lose you again, which seems likely, I would just hop back in with the computer, and that might have a better connection. We'll just deal with not seeing you, because at least we'll be able to hear you consistently. But it's something like, it is heartbreaking, but with everything that's gone on over like the last 2 to 6 years, I feel like more of a spotlight has been put on these issues. So somebody like me is more aware of what negative things are going on that we just can be blind to because we're not on the receiving end of it. And I know there was not even somebody that I was close friends with, but like we're Facebook friends, and he is of Asian descent. And with COVID, like, oh, it's the Asian flu and people getting harassed and everything, he and a few other friends that have Asian ethnicity had shared experiences that they had when we were in high school. And it was something that they just bottled up with, because they probably talked with family about it, but there are people that you can talk. As difficult as it can be, like, I wish he would have said something so we knew what he was going through. So it's definitely difficult to have that open communication, but I think the work that you're doing, I would say, is great.
And I
So
think that
Adria,
there's more resources now for kids. There's more resources now for kids when they do have these kinds of situations. Certainly, in my daughter's school, they developed a department of equity and diversity, and they developed a situation where the kids who are identifying as Black could have a safe space to talk with the counselor who is there. And so there's more awareness, and it seems like there's more resources devoted to it as well. I didn't really want my daughter to sort of carry this burden, kind of as Alize was saying, of the person who is saying, well, I'm Black and so I'm stupid, and what does that mean? And it's a burden that you carry, right? Because you're always trying to disprove what that person said, whether you say it outright or not. It's something that you're carrying around. And so I think having the opportunity to talk with my daughter about it, to sort of get ahead of it when she's really small, and still keep the dialogue open, I think that's going to be helpful for her and for the generation that is present in school right now.
there was a quote that I pulled from your author note at the end of the book. What happens when you are proud of where you what happens when you are proud of where you came from? You are free to become who you are and become who you are meant to be. And that, I wrote it down because I really connected with that, because there's so much, because of the African American history. Like, for me, like, there is a town in Pennsylvania that I'm a direct descendant of the founder, and it's Linglestown, Pennsylvania. And like, I get pride from that, even though I have absolutely nothing to do with it. And to not be able to have those same experiences in America, like, I love what you're doing with the book and identifying with the pride and the hopes and wants of the people that came before you. I think the book is very powerful in that way. And if anyone's just joining us or came in late, we were talking with Adrea Theodore and Erin Robinson, the author and illustrator of A History of Me, which you can see in Erin's picture there. Alize Scott's here with us from the YWCA. If you're watching from Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, if you have any questions or comments, use the comment feature, and you can. We'll try to incorporate those in. Alize, did you have any questions for Adrea or Erin?
Yeah, actually, I do have one question in particular. Obviously, the book is pointing out how a Black girl in class feels when they're discussing these issues because she's the only person in class. And that's something that I keep in mind when we're developing our Reading to End Racism program. Because, like I said, we live in a predominantly white area, so typically there is only one person of color in the classroom or a very small handful. And the one thing that I'm worried about is when we discuss some of these topics or when we discuss something where that child can relate to it, is that they're going to feel singled out. And so I just wanted to know if you had any advice of how to kind of deal with that. If a student, when we are talking about these things, it makes them feel more singled out at first than empowered. How would you go about addressing something like that?
That for me or for Adria?
It's for you now.
It's for you now that Adria's gone.
No, Adria's back. So, LSA, if you wanted to reiterate the question.
Yes. So what I was saying is I'm worried that when we bring up some of these stories within the classroom and there is just that single person in there that they can resonate with it, but at the same time, they might feel singled out by us discussing these things. I was just wondering how you would go about addressing something like that if their first response is to feel kind of singled out instead of empowered.
Well, I think part of that is, I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but I think part of it is not putting the burden on the child to answer the question or to be the representative of the the Black and brown culture, that they should have all the answers. And so I think that's sort of part of it, is recognizing that they are still a kid, and and if everyone is there to learn, then they are also there to learn. They're not there to teach other people certain things. So I think that would be part of it, is not sort of putting an extra burden on that child, regardless of the act or whatever the activity is that you're doing in the classroom.
Thank you.
Did you have something to add, Erin?
No, I'm going with what you're saying. I don't feel like like you said, an expert in that category, but I pretty much agree with what you're saying.
Because I think, I mean, I know that from my daughter, just in talking with her, she's been in situations where the class has been discussing something, and she's not the only person, but she might be one of two in the class. And then the teacher will say something, and then we'll ask her, "Isn't that right?" Or, "What do you think about that?" And so again, it puts her on the spot, which as a teenager, you never want to be put on the spot in the first place. But certainly when there's a question about race, specifically. So as if she was the expert in that. And part of what we're trying to say is that we're all different. We have our own individuality, and we don't all think the same or experience the same things. And so again, just don't put them on the spot as if they have all the answers for the culture.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Did you have any other questions at this time, LSA?
Not at this time, but I'm sure I'll think of something.
I was just we've been hopping around with my list of questions. Adria, are there more children's books in your future that you have working on?
Yes, there are. I can't really talk about them at the moment, but yes, there are. Can I go back to something else that we had started to talk about?
Yes, absolutely. Please.
Just to kind of can finish that discussion.
Yes.
Or finish that question. You had asked about the aspects that I chose to put in the book about, just the aspects of, I guess, education that are in the book. And that was the aspects of the person's history that I chose to put in the book. And so I chose to focus on education because of the fact that we were talking about something that happened at my daughter's school. We were thinking about my experiences as a child in school. And I thought that focusing on the education would be something that's easy for kids to understand because, we all go to school when we're young. But also it kind of shows how the potential of people in past generations just was not appreciated. It wasn't taken advantage of. They weren't allowed to, to learn to their full potential or achieve their full potential. And I think that's something that our country has missed out on, but also the generations that have come before. So the fact that, my parents didn't finish college or didn't go to college, and my parents' parents didn't go to college before that, has affected me. And so the past even slavery, though it was a long time ago, there are still ramifications of that we can see in the educational system and in the achievement of certain families like mine. And so again, wanted to show the link between the past and the present using the education system because it's something that's familiar to everyone.
And with that, we can segue. There was an excerpt of the book that you had wanted to read. We'll see if the camera's not working, but the screen share function should maybe work. If you wanted to see if we can bring that up.
I'll try.
If not, you can tell me what page to go to, and I can show it on my screen.
Okay, that might be. Nope, that's not going to work.
Right. I can go low tech, and I will hold up the book.
Let's see. How about we just start in the beginning? That might be the easiest way to do it.
Perfect.
And I'll read the first couple of pages, I guess.
All right.
All right. I was the only brown person in class. So when we talked about slavery, I could feel every eye staring at me behind my back. When the teacher talked about picking cotton and slave shacks and sisters being sold away separately, I wanted to slide out of my seat and onto the floor and drift out the door. This is Erin's favorite picture. My mom had told me before that her great-great-grandmother on her mother's side was born enslaved, but she died young, so we didn't know much about her. And one more. And so I should be grateful to go to school and learn. I was. I love to learn.
Thank you so much. We would read the whole book, but then I wouldn't be able to share this video forever afterwards. So you will have to get the rest of the book by picking up a copy. Is there anything else that either anyone here would like to add to the discussion?
Can't think of anything right now. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming. I'm so glad that Holiday House had reached out about doing this event. We love having difficult conversations because they're important. And I think this is the first time that we've done a children's book, and I wasn't sure how this would go because normally it's a nonfiction book and we have pages and all of these things to go into that are just from the book. So we had to get a little bit personal now. And thank you for sharing your experiences. Mm-hmm. I am aware of the irony of a story about being the only African-American girl in school is being hosted by the only white guy in the conversation. So thank you for entertaining that conversation from somebody who is totally ignorant to so many of the issues, but I'm trying. And I think there's a lot of interest about this discussion ahead of time. I've seen more discussion, more people reaching out to me about this event than I've had for any of our past events. So thank you for having this conversation because people seem to really want to have it.
That's great. I think one thing in the national conversation obviously has been recently parents, or people saying that parents really want to have a say in the curriculum or talk about the curriculum or see what kind of books and what kinds of things their kids are being taught. I've had other parents say that, on TV we hear about white parents being concerned that their kids are being taught about history and wanting to, again, direct the conversation about what they're being taught. There has been less that I've seen about Black parents asking about the curriculum and wondering, what their children are being taught and how it's being taught and how it's affecting them. And so I think if we're going to have the conversation, that it should be a balanced conversation.
Mm-hmm.
because most of the time, as people say, that the people who write the history books are the ones who win the wars, or who are seen as the ones who are in charge of everything. And so if we're going to have the conversation, I think it would be great to have everybody's voice at the table, in terms of deciding what's being taught and how, so that nobody's feeling bad about who they are.
That's great.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like as far as the Black history curriculum is taught within our educational systems, we only focus on the trauma that Black people experience. And obviously this is an important part of our history and we need to know these things. But I feel like that's why it's very hard to engage with Black students, even when it comes to talking about things like slavery, because that's not what they want to hear is always the trauma. We have so many things that we can celebrate within our culture, and we have so many things that we can celebrate before slavery even existed. And I feel like we need to do a better job of going back to Africa and really learning about African civilizations and making that a part of the curriculum, instead of making Black children think that their history started with slavery and now it's just nothing but oppression and nothing good has happened in between there at all. We need to do a better job of making sure that they feel empowered and that they're learning the side of history where they were the victors and they did all these great things and they made all these different inventions, and really celebrating everything that Black culture has brought here to America. I think that's very important and something that our education systems need to do a better job of.
Yeah, and I think one thing I wanted to say about the, I guess, the part of our ancestry that was here during slavery times is that there is still something to celebrate about the people who were here, who were enslaved. That's not something that we focus on at all, is their humanity. But they survived, and once slavery was over, they started to thrive in the society that had kept them oppressed for so long. So I do think that we can take pride in those ancestors as well, even after Africa, and consider both sides of the Atlantic, I guess, in a way.
That is great. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or anything that they wanted to add into the conversation? All right. Well, Adrea, I wanted to thank you for rolling through all of those technical issues. I wanted to share with you that the very first virtual author event that we did was pre-COVID, before virtual author events were basically the only option. And it was with an author that we've connected with a couple times, but he had talked about technical issues that he always ran into. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to work to make sure that this thing is seamless. And it was anything but. We were at the library. We had people in attendance there. He was broadcasted in, and we were going to project it up onto a screen from my computer. The projector wasn't working. And then we were like, all right, well, we'll just do it off my computer screen. It's big enough for the people that are here. And then that wasn't working. So then I'm like, or it was pretty quiet. So then I'm like, all right, well, I have a speaker, a Bluetooth speaker at the store. I'm just going to run back to the store, run back to the library, have the speaker so it's louder. I came back. I was all sweaty. I was a mess. And then the speaker wasn't working. And then FaceTime wasn't working. So it ended up being, there was like 12 of us sitting around a circle in the library around my phone that was just on speakerphone,
Wow.
having a conversation. So I think the point of all of that is the conversation is more important. Whether or not we can see you or whether things are working perfectly. So thank you again for continuously coming back, even though the internet really wanted you to not be here for some reason.
For some reason, I can't tell you. Thank you for having us. Enjoyed it.
Thank
So,
you.
A History of Me by Adrea Theodore and illustrated by Erin K. Robinson. We have it in the store. You can pick it up also from our website, obpbooks.com. If you're not from the area, you can use that website, but I also encourage you to tell your local independent bookstore to have it in stock if they don't already. We do have some events that were scheduled later in the year, but I'll tell you about them now just real quick. our next conversation scheduled right now is going to be April 6th, Ageism Unmasked by Dr. Tracy Gendron. And it's about ageism from all aspects of it, young versus old versus young, the people in the middle, and how to redefine age and think about it differently. Just having this book in the store inspired a conversation with a man that was older than me, who's going to watch this later. And we both said that neither of us, like, I'm almost 40. I don't know how old he is, older than that. But we still didn't feel like adults. And just kind of redefining what age is. May 4th will be a conversation with Jim Cosgrove, who is also Mr. Stinky Feet, if you have small children and YouTube. But this is not for children. It's a long, strange search for a killer. In the 80s, there was a person in their community that went missing, and then they were found dead in South Carolina, and there was a disconnect of where is this person and who is this person, and it was many years before they figured it out. And Jim documented that discovery process. And then June 29th is the last event that we have scheduled right now, and it's by Lisa Forbes, and it's called I Can Take It From Here. I don't yet have a copy of it. One's getting sent to me. But Lisa is an ex-con. She was convicted for a pretty serious crime, but she is now out. She started up a company to help release prisoners get connected with jobs because she was out and people didn't want to hire her. And so she created her own company and was her mission is to try to help people that are recently released from prison. So those will all be very interesting conversations. We'll have them up on our website and our Facebook page as we get closer to them. Thank you all so much for continuing the conversation, and this is really great. And thanks for everyone that tuned in. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. It helps. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.